Hey everybody, Mr. Skorecki here. Welcome World History Fanatics. We are starting World War II this pod. World War II, as you probably know, was a major war between you can say 1939 to about 1945. It's going to start earlier if you count what happened in Asia. But it's basically right after we come out of World War I and we realize the horrible things that happened. There's a period of like a little bit of prosperity, everything's going well, and then we're right into another world war again. Hopefully you get this joke. If you don't, let me know. I just don't want to explain it in the video because it kind of takes away from some of the joy of it. This was Churchill giving the V for victory and Adolf Hitler giving the Nazi salute known as the Sieg Heil. So we're going to talk about World War II, and I know you all know something about it already. It's kind of a famous war. You might know things about it, might have seen movies about it. So I'm going to go over more along the lines of what causes the war, why was the war important. But if you notice that, hey, Mr. S, I wanted to learn more about this, or can you talk about this, it's something I'm really interested in, tell me. Because we're going to be talking about this in the next pod too, and I want to make sure I'm covering all the stuff that you want. All right. Oh, sorry, let me go back. So we have to go over this because it's part of our paperwork. Central questions: what political and economic forces led to global conflict in the 20th century? And we're going to see why World War II starts. Part of it has to do with politics, part of it has to do with money, there's all these other things going into it. How did the 20th century conflict impact people of the world? You can probably guess what happens when you have a world war, how it impacts people, especially since we just covered World War I. And just think how your life would be different if you were born in one of those times. This is this is a question or a concept that comes up a lot in these assignments. It's just something for you to think about. Like, it's one of these like, oh, I'd be fighting. Well, if you were, if you were like 16 versus you're 13, like, what would, like, you wake up? What does your house look like? What do you have for breakfast? What's the worst thing you're going to worry about today? That's kind of what we want you to do with it. It's kind of an easier way to think about what's going on here and kind of understand why these things were so important. Now, the objectives and competencies examine the impact of worldwide advancements in communication and transportation. Wars tend to make good technology. Most of it's for the unfortunate thing of killing people, but there's still some other good stuff to come out of it, like radio. Analyze the impact of military alliances. I know you're thinking, hey, we did it in World War I. Well, World War II had the same thing. They tried to avoid that by using the League of Nations, but it just ended up making it worse. And everyone had made a military alliance basically by all blaming Germany for the war. Investigate the impact of totalitarianism on Europe. What that means is Europe is basically going to go through a period where instead of being democratically elected people, because they distrusted their leaders from World War I, they're going to change them to what are basically dictators. That's where you hear names like Hitler, Il Duce, Franco, Stalin, all those things. There's a connection between World War I, the Great Depression, World War II. If you think about World War II in terms of resources, which is something we're going to cover later in the pod, it starts to make sense. And assess the consequences of global war on the world. Basically, what does it do? You have your standards over there. Kind of the same things we've been. If you need help with those, want those to make sense, please let me know. Art changes. Again, we're still dealing with that idea that we are disillusioned. There's this loss of innocence. And you see the way that people paint to look at the world changes, so does art. Just give me time to absorb that in. Guess just by the drawing style you can tell who did this piece of art in World War II. We'll talk about it. Science, post-World War I, we had learned a whole bunch. With Einstein, with Curie, with Fleming, with Freud, we start understanding that, if we can do all this to kill people in large amounts, what else can we learn from it? What can we use this for kind of good if we know how to mobilize and do all these things? So we start to make vaccinations. We start to use radiation. We understand physics in a very different way that helps us, to this day. And then we start looking at mental health as something, not just like demons. And again, keep in mind what we talked about the Great Depression. What is it about? Because the Great Depression wasn't just in the USA, it was all around the world. Look at the unemployment in Germany. Okay? In 1929, unemployment's about 6%. Okay, it gets up to, look at that, what would you say that is? 34.5%. 1933, and it decreases. Right around that point in 1930, late 1933, about halfway through, that's when Hitler comes to power. And look at how that unemployment rate rises down. To compare that, if you want to think about, oh, hey, we were in a recession and we're kind of coming out of it right now, the highest our unemployment rate had gotten was about 10% by 2012, by the worst of it. They were at 34%. Politics, we already talked about, are going to change majorly. I just love this picture. World War II also marks a huge spread in propaganda. We had done it before, and all countries had done it before in World War I and in other things, but you start to see a lot of little use of that newly understood psychology to make it super effective. I just love this one, I'm sorry. Riding alone with Hitler. And how society changes after World War I and at the start of World War II. The Treaty of Versailles left countries poor, economic depression, but women are also making a huge push to get their rights to vote. They've been fighting for it for a while, but now we're actually starting to see it happen. All right. And the last thing I'm going to cover with you today, and then let you go so you can get started on learning about the stuff proper, not just the introduction. Thinking about fascism. Fascism is, the word gets thrown around a lot today. Oh, we have to buy healthcare, so that's fascism. Oh, we have to, it's like, oh, we can't, we're being monitored by the NSA, that's fascism. I'm not saying those things are good or bad. I'm just saying that that's not what fascism is. Fascism is a very specific type of government. And it comes from the symbol of authority in Rome called the fasces. Fascism actually comes from, that guy on the left is Benito Mussolini, he's Italian. His party was the, his party was the fascists, themselves after the Fascia di Combattimento, which basically means the bundle stick axe of war. So you get some symbols of what that is, but when you think about it, it's an axe with a whole bunch of sticks around it. Why is that a big deal? Why does that mean? I think about the fact that it has to have an axe. It's not like, like a scythe for reaping corn. It's an instrument of war, and it's a bunch of individual pieces wrapped up together, bound together, forcefully tied together. You start to see the mindset of these people. All right. Well, that's enough for today. Go ahead and answer the questions below, and then we'll get started on the really good stuff afterwards. Thanks for listening. Talk to you all later.